Thursday afternoon chat. Your favorite artists with Jayar.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, will you please put your pause, unless you're driving, for today's guest, the legendary Mr. Matt Maher.
Thank you very much.
It has been a couple years.
It's good to be back, Johnny.
Yeah. So you were one of my last guests pre-pandemic, and here we are, hopefully, at the end.
Post-pandemic.
Post-pandemic. So how has it been?
I think like everyone, it's ultimately, you think as a Christian, you're always praying and believing that the things that are revealed in Scripture are true, including that God is working all things together for our good.
Yep.
So I would like to be able to say how it is that I'm every day choosing to believe He's working all things together for my good. It was ultimately there were massive gifts and opportunities that were presented over the past 2 years, really, that I don't know if they would have happened any other way. So didn't have to go down that way, but it did. Yeah. And I got to be with my wife and kids a lot, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And also, in some ways, God really took me on a inward journey that I think really provided a lot of the basis for new material. And, so excited to be moving forward.
Right, for sure. Let's deal with this green blanket behind us.
Yep.
All the artists, were giving you a chance to pick your background. You've seen our list. What would you like to go
I
with?
would like to be Ireland.
All right, let's do it with one clap of the... it's still green.
There,
Does that work?
That's why I picked Ireland, because it's green.
I've been sitting on that joke for so long, and somebody finally picked Ireland. Hey, it's not working. Because it's green. Do you get it? It's still green? Yeah. Okay, we all got it. All right. As somebody who lived in Ireland for 2 years, I would not have picked it because only the tourists get the wonderful experience of leprechauns dancing with you down the street. I had to deal with rain, dark, dreary, very much how you probably felt in Newfoundland growing up.
But I actually have a real fondness for it.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are like, this is so depressing. I'm like, I don't know. It just kind of feels like Monday.
Right. Yeah, I went from 18 years in Seattle where it rains every day and it's gloomy and gray. And I went on a mission trip for 2 years to Ireland, which was exchanging the same. Yeah.
You just got accents. That was the only thing.
Yeah. It was, but Darren of We Are Messengers will tell you the same thing. There is a everybody that's a tourist goes and has a good time and tears it up. But when you live there, it's not as cheery and chipper as St. Patty's Day.
It's not, but I will say that sense of melancholy is also what has produced so many amazing songs and art.
Yeah.
And I think at the heart of it is a longing, a capacity for and a longing for connection. I think ultimately with God.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's
very much so
what I believe. But I think it does. It also creates like a wider expanse of the human experience.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's dive into. You've got new music that you're going to be trickling out throughout the year.
Yep.
Is that good to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's kind of it. I think coming out of this past couple of years, definitely the way that people are experiencing, interacting with, hearing, being moved by music has really fundamentally changed. You know, if someone said to me, like, what's different from when you first started doing this to now? What's different about music? And I'm like, well, the way that people are interacting with it. On a personal level, it's still the same thing. People have experiences in their life. They hear a song of yours. It impacts their life. It moves them. But the ways in which that's happening now are so different. And even as an artist now, the way that artists are sharing, creating, collaborating, and sharing new music, it's sort of like an ever-evolving process, really. So we're kind of trying things up different and going to just start slowly just kind of putting out new music.
Let's actually go into, I guess, the first drop of your trickle of songs is a new song called Leaning. Can you just walk me up the song DNA of Leaning?
I mean, the DNA of it's really in the title. The song was written with some friends. I found myself a lot just really like everyone, the world kind of shuts down, people get closed in, and you kind of start just living life with the people that you're with. And obviously it's my family. But then as the world kind of gradually opened up, it really opened up to the people that were directly around me. And with that comes the possibility of community and connection. And so this is a song written with some friends. It's just really an honest prayer that just sort of came out of two things. I think talking about the reality of fellowship with God as something that's very tangible and very real. The crux of the song is really just that line from that old hymn, like, I'm leaning on your everlasting arms. And the notion of living a life that way that feels less like I'm trying to stay propped up on my own 2 feet. I'll explain it this way. I've got 2 dogs, and one of the dogs, my wife and I are convinced that somehow him and my youngest son have like the same, I don't know what it is, but like they act the same way. Yeah. They're both rambunctious. They're both adventurous.
Poop in the backyard.
Yeah, exactly. They both got sick at the same time. Huh. It's like E.T. and Elliot. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's this weird symbiotic relationship. I don't get it. But they both do the same thing, which is that when they're scared, they push into you.
Right.
And it's this, you read in the Gospels about John the Beloved leaning into Jesus. And how it was both a sign of trust and a sign of security. But in some ways, from a real physiological sense, like if your weight is fully on someone else, like you're not even really holding yourself up anymore. And that God invites that. He invites us to kind of participate in life with him that way. Yeah. That we're not even really. And I just think about so many experiences of myself in the past year and why I feel like this song sort of came out with some friends. And there's a new artist who's kind of featured on the song who I wrote it with, along with 2 other friends, but her name is Lizzie Morgan. And she used to sing backing vocals for Lauren Daigle for a long time. She's just incredible. She's done a lot of stuff with Maverick City. She's an amazing worship leader. But I think in a lot of times, like why this song was written, we weren't trying to write something. It just sort of came out. And I think for me, why it came out was that I found myself continually in the pandemic having experiences of running up against a wall of life. And a lot of it was anxiety, I'm sure. And it's really just a lack of control. Yeah. The inability to change a circumstance or a situation. Yeah. And you want to try to like muscle it into a different zone, but you can't. Yeah. And so then there's all this frustration and anger and fear, and it was about a million different things. And versus the idea of saying, I'm going to try to live my life in a way where all my weight is on God.
Yeah. That's great. I picture your album cover looks something like Weekend at Bernie's.
Yeah, it's a total gangster lean. Yep.
You went with John the Beloved. I was totally thinking Weekend at Bernie's.
That's amazing. Well, yeah, one was a corpse. Yeah. It's the same concept, really.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Yeah, Bernie, John the Beloved.
God, Jesus is holding me up like Bernie's.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a shot of me on water skis, just sort of skipping off the water.
That is a great image.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I think I kind of found myself kind of picking apart the way I write songs. Yeah. During the pandemic, and one of the things was just wanting to get back to a place of just writing out of the cry of my heart, and not necessarily about like sitting down saying we're going to write a song about this. And there are some songs in this next kind of season where it was that, but I'm trying to get back to a place of like going, I don't know why this came out. But it was really just like a cry within my soul.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like when you're writing, I think especially worship music, it typically, the great stuff, it isn't contrived.
Yeah.
It's deep calling to deep. Like you're going, I don't even know why that I said these things. It just sort of came out.
Yeah, look at John Mark McMillan's How He Loves.
Oh.
When you look at that guy, he can't even talk about it. Like when you see that video that's gotten gazillions of hits of his friend dying, it's like, well, outside of the sloppy wet kiss line, it's like, it's this deep place that he's like, wait, I don't understand. You love me, but yet this tragic thing has happened to my best friend. And it ends up being one of the biggest worship songs in history.
Dude, one of my favorite sort of gospel moments in an unexpected way. Did you watch WandaVision? So
I don't listen to hip hop. What is it? Sorry.
WandaVision.
No.
So WandaVision was the show that came on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And they came out during the pandemic, and it was basically about Wanda and Vision from the Avengers.
Okay.
So you live in Florida. You're supposed to know all things Disney World.
Yes.
So basically, I don't want to spoil the whole story, but there's this one line in a show where Vision says this amazing, it's this encapsulation. He says, isn't grief just love persevering? And I was like, wow. And then more recently, there was I saw an interview on it was like one of the late night shows with Andrew Garfield, who's an actor, and he talked about grief and how grief is unexpressed love.
Yeah.
So all that to say, I think, when I made the last studio album I made was Echoes, so many of the songs were based on old hymns, and they were basically inspired. Most of those hymns were written out of trauma and grief originally.
Yeah.
So it's still sort of the same kind of an inescapable thing.
Yeah.
I think for me, I was pushed to a lot of limits within myself over the past 2 years, particularly as a parent, of like going, there's only so much you can control.
Yeah.
And there's so much about the world around you that you really don't, you can try to like mitigate as much and protect and shield your kids from like as many terrible different outcomes or scenarios. And at the end of the day, sometimes you do what you can because it's what God calls you to do. And at the same time, there's sort of this feeling of the sense of, I have no idea.
Yeah.
So I really just need to trust.
Yeah. Growing up in you're one of the only people in history that's ever gone from Newfoundland to Arizona. That's true. I guess I've done a similar thing, Seattle to Florida. But
just went the other way.
Yeah. Yeah, you and I were doing crisscross.
Yeah.
We should have met in Iowa.
We should have.
I don't know what your parents did for a living, but what would you say was a perk of one of your parents' jobs growing up?
I mean, my mom was a school teacher. And my dad, up until the second grade, was a restaurateur.
Okay.
So he owned a seafood restaurant, and then he owned a piano bar.
Okay.
And so definitely the perk was going down to work with him on Saturdays.
Yeah.
And making swamp juice out of all the soda fountain machines, which was basically mixing all the fountain drinks together.
Yeah.
Which, that just sounds like a great activity for a kid.
Right.
What could go wrong?
Right.
And playing Ms. Pac-Man.
Right. For free?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's that thing of like, I hear that song. And then you can hear it, and it like, I'll walk into a video arcade and I'll hear it, and automatically I can smell my dad's restaurant when I was a kid. And so that was definitely a perk.
For sure. Gosh, my dad changed the price tags at a grocery store, so I got to run the aisles after it was closed. Glorious, but it's still no kid got to do that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, to see that place. I guess if I wasn't a Christian, You know,
Oh yeah, you just
nobody's
start,
watching you.
Yeah, 5-finger discount.
Everything is mine.
Yeah.
But I guess he wouldn't have made it 40
No,
years
No,
at
no,
that
no.
job.
Neither would he. He probably would have got fired. Yeah.
I have this. I have to come up with these randomly silly questions to allow you to play around because a lot of your music is very powerful stuff, and so we hit that, we touch on that, and then I got to make you dance in this
Okay.
second grade level.
Yep.
I have just an odd man crush on somebody, and I want to get you to go there with me.
Is this an accountability group?
No,
Okay.
it's not that bad. But I love David Beckham. I don't think he's a believer, but as far as I just like, he's a great dad, and everything I see on Instagram, I'm like, man, I've loved this. Soccer is a passion.
Yeah, he's a fantastic specimen of a human being.
Yes, and he looks, so if I wasn't so obese, we would look alike, and so all this. Why are you guys shaking your head? No. So he's my man crush is David Beckham. Is there anybody for you that you're like, that's my guy? You can take it somewhere, like if it's a spiritual thing, but also just from somebody you've followed for a long time, that's your guy in a non-creepy way.
Well, I think I would probably say, some people might be scandalized, but I think Dave Grohl.
Foo Fighters?
Yeah. He's kind of living the dream. Purely from a human standpoint of like, he's making music that he loves with a group of guys that he's formed a real strong bond with.
Yeah.
And it seems like he's having a blast while he's doing it.
And the fact that he didn't go away after being a part of one of the biggest bands in history. Like Ringo Starr kind of disappeared, but the fact that Grohl went and did something post Nirvana.
Yeah. Well, and after watching the Beatles documentary, I would say Paul McCartney.
Yeah. Oh, as far as a man.
The new documentary.
Okay.
Because it really is like a testament. It is a testament to how deep his creativity goes.
Yeah.
But it's weird with music. It's different because it's like I love these people for the music they make, but I also understand that part of what helps us make music is that we're all slightly damaged. so like
we're all leaning.
Yeah, like I don't know. Yeah, it's totally true. We're all leaning. I'm like, I don't know if I want to go to you for parenting advice, but which I'm like, I don't know if they would want me to either.
Right,
you know what I mean? They'd probably be like, which in some ways is kind of refreshing. There's no experts.
Yeah.
Like no one's an expert at anything. Like
I don't know.
we're
Beckham
all just,
looks pretty. He looks like he's doing well.
Yeah, his diet. Steve Nash and I are the same age.
The basketball player.
Yep.
Okay.
Both Canadian.
Yeah.
Fantastic basketball player.
Yeah.
And I think that requires a certain level. And he's coaching. He's coaching the Nets now. And that's to walk into that team. You got some massive personalities and talent to kind of navigate and deal with. So
it's like an Enneagram soup.
Yeah, totally. And he's had incredible longevity. So I would say, Steve Nash for sure would be someone I would love. I'd love to get to know.
A countryman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go with last year. YouVersion Bible app put out their 2020, kind of like Spotify does their year-end wrap. YouVersion does their, here's the data of the most searched for scriptures of the year kind of a deal. And so it's always interesting to see what they declare people have searched for the most. And it was Matthew 6:33 about, you take care of the lilies of the field and
don't worry
about a thing. So for you looking back at 2021 last year, just top of mind, can you think of something that was this sustained me this year? This was something like I heard a Louis Giglio talk this past year in a book he came out with called Don't Give the Enemy a Seat at Your Table. But somewhere in there, he started going through Habakkuk 3. And I was like, I've read the Bible through before, but you don't, at different stages of your life, you stop. And then when you're older, you stop at something else. And it's like, I've read that. Why did that not wreck me when I was 16? But it was about, if no grapes grow on the vines, no cattle in the stall, I will still trust in the name of the Lord for the God, for his love. And it wrecked me this year and got it part of it tattooed on me,
Wow.
So it was my 2021. Anything from this year that you can think of that that stopped you in your tracks?
Well, it's interesting because it's an interesting thing because it's not so much a single scripture, it's more of a character in the Bible.
Yeah.
So at the end of last year, being a Catholic, it's sort of this thing where you like have this pastor who like, it was just kind of how people look at the Pope, and he sort of throws out, hey, sometimes he'll throw out a letter and say, hey, y'all should pray about this.
Yeah.
Or, and so he wrote a letter about Joseph,
Yeah.
father of Jesus.
Right.
So I've kind of spent the last year reflecting on his life, which there is minimally about
Right.
in the scriptures. And it all kind of came to a head for me being part of the Chosen Christmas special.
Yeah. Right.
Which I just got to be part of. And that episode, which I'm assuming by now people have seen it, so I'm not spoiling it.
Yeah. Most of our listeners, if you're...
But, Dallas Jenkins and I talked a lot about, we had a great conversation, and he just sort of talked about how, like, he, as a man, kept getting his feet knocked out from under him around the birth of Jesus. Mm-hmm. How, like, he has to take his family to Bethlehem. And so they wrote in this scene where like she's on the donkey and she wants to get off the donkey. And so he's trying to get her to stay on the donkey and she won't kind of listen to him. So he lets her get off the donkey. And so then that makes him late. So then they get to Bethlehem late and he can't find his uncle. And so they can't find a place to stay. And then they go to an inn and he can't get a room. And sort of like all these like just sort of like feelings of inadequacy, which to me, I would say if there's anything I feel like I've struggled with a lot in the past 2 years is that sense of like, do I have what it takes to provide for my family, to be a dad to my kids, to show up for my wife as a husband? And am I willing to set aside my own fears, my own anxieties, not shelve them away and don't deal with them. Yeah. But at the same time, there's a certain level of like practical maturity of like, just because you have stuff going on doesn't mean you get to not show up for the people around you. Mm-hmm. So I would say the character of Joseph and journeying the past year and reflecting on what was it like to be the guy who raised Jesus, like who brought him into maturity as a young man.
Right.
Like the weight, and not only that, but like he's 12 years old and they lose him after a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So it's kind of been this process of like just cyclically, which it's only like it's like the first part of most of the Gospels, what I mean? Like, Luke and Matthew, you're just sort of sitting in this one spot, but just thinking about that and how, regardless of denomination, people know about, obviously they know about Jesus, they know about Mary. Yeah. But here's this guy who's like sort of hidden in obscurity. Right. And in some ways that feeling the invitation of the Holy Spirit saying, hey, are you willing to do that for your family? Yeah. So, yeah, it's like, are you, as a father, right, are you willing to slowly fade?
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Willing was the word that popped into my
head.
Yeah,
right, I mean, willing is, that's a great word. Like, are you willing to do that? Like, which, John the Baptist says I must decrease so he can increase. Yeah. But yeah, so I would say that for me, it's been more of like a reflection on the person, character, and nature of Joseph.
All right. Cool. Let's wrap on this. First of all, looking forward to just exploring more songs this year because I've missed your voice. The pandemic was like, as a Matt Maher diehard, just your presence on our playlist is always a great thing. But I was wondering, as we've had all the artists that I've had on, just give me one line vocally, singing the Jayar show with just a Matt Maher sound, so that as I play Leaning throughout the year to just kind of like this, just singing the Jayar show, and then I'll use that throughout the year. Whenever I play Leaning, I'll play your voice singing the Jayar show.
Is it any melody?
Any melody.
Well, I got to think if it's like, you're listening to the Jayar Show.
There it is. Always appreciate you stopping by. Appreciate your heart more than anything. I mean, you've got a velvety voice, but I appreciate your heart. Always learning is what I know about you. No matter how old you get, your heart is still wanting to learn and know Christ more. So, and it's always great to have a laugh with you as well.
Well, life is a classroom. God's a teacher, and it's always great to be learning with you.
Perfect. Awesome.
The Thursday Afternoon Chat. Your favorite artists with Jayar.